Hello, and welcome to our event today with Jill Duggar and Dillard and her husband, Derick Dillard. My name is Luisa Smith, and I'm the Bind Director for Book Passage and the very lucky host of today's event. I would like to thank all of you for being here today. We know that you have a lot of options for how to spend your time on a lovely fall Wednesday like this. So thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Book Passage has a robust events program both in-store and online, in no small part due to supporters like you. I hope you will have a chance after today's event to visit our website and see who else is coming. Today, we are lucky to have Jill Duggar Dillard and Derick Dillard here to discuss their just released memoir, Counting the Cost. Jill grew up as the star of the hit TLC reality show, 19 Kids and Counting. She was the first Duggar daughter to marry, and over 4.4 million people tuned in to watch the 2-hour wedding special on television. Her life with husband Derick Dillard was featured on the show Jill and Jessa, Counting On, and Jill is currently the oldest daughter living outside her parents' home. Along with her 3 sisters, Jill has previously written and published the New York Times bestseller, Growing Up Duggar. In her new memoir, Jill discusses and Derick discuss what it was like to grow up in the traditional Christian family that captivated the nation on TLC's hit show, and in their words, share their story, including what happened behind the scenes, is so far made hidden from fans. The best part of these live events is that it allows you, the audience, to ask your own questions of our authors. So if you have a question for Jill or Derick, please enter it in the chat, and we will try to get as many possible towards the end of the event. We also want to let you know that we do have some signed book plates, and if you order through the link that we will be adding to the chat there, the first 50 people will be lucky enough to get one of them. And with that, I would like to welcome Jill and Derick to our event. Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. And I understand this is your first event.
It is the very first live event.
Wow. Thank you. I'm really excited to do this. I loved the book, like I was telling you before we went live. It brought up a few tears a few times and a lot of smiles. There's a lot of things that you cover in the book. And I want to quote a part that you actually, there's something you wrote towards the end of the book, but I think gives a real flavor for the entire book. You said it's like roses and thorns, justice and grace. You can recognize the beauty and happy parts of your story while also recognizing the more difficult parts. The two can coexist. The highs aren't automatically erased or invalidated by the lows. And you really start this book talking about your family, your parents, and the incredible love that was in the house growing up. How did you decide what to include when you were writing this book?
Yeah, we had an amazing writer who helped us kind of through our story. There were obviously very important parts that I wanted to hit on, and that Derick also did in telling our story. I feel like it was helpful also to have that outside perspective of our writer, Mr. Craig Borlace, and he really helped us kind of narrow down some of the more, I don't know, like emotional parts that really spoke and would tell our story the way that we want it told. So
he gave good structure to it, because it's easy, I think, because of the kind of book that we're writing, to go down a rabbit hole. And he really did a good job keeping us on track and making it cohesive and structuring it well.
Yeah.
It really is beautifully structured. And I did wonder while reading it, if it changed the way you thought about any of those periods of times in your life when you finally had to say out loud what it was like.
It was a very therapeutic process, just writing it down. And then, of course, it was grueling as well, just having to rehash a lot of the less than beautiful parts of our story. And so to have to like edit and go back over everything, that part was very hard to do. But yeah, I think for the most part, the story stayed very true to what we wanted it to be for the readers and how it actually came about.
You do talk about the kind of bewilderment that came into people's eyes when they saw you and your family, and to be in that spotlight and to sort of stand out. How is that for you to always have people looking and thinking and judging and sort of in awe also. I mean, sometimes they were just in awe of you guys. It wasn't all negative, but it was always, you were always a center of attention to a certain degree because you stood out as a family. How was that growing up?
Yeah, very much that way. So initially, like we say in the book, like initially it would be people talking to us and saying, oh my, like, are they all yours? Are all those kids to my parents, of course, and then counting, oh my goodness, how many? And asking a lot of questions like that. And then as the show became more popular and we would get recognized when we were out and about, then is when we would get less of those types of comments and more of just like people saying, oh, I saw your show, or I know this about, or this is my favorite episode of your of your show, or whatever, asking questions that questions about things that they had seen on the show.
And you talked about how you were the best approval hunter in your family. How was it in that family? Like, everybody have their own personality in terms of what their role was. You were the approval hunter person. How hard is it to break away from that?
I think really a lot of people can relate to just being people pleasers and being those approval hunters. So for me, I kind of did see there were like groupings of us in the whole lineup with that many kids. Obviously, there are a lot of different personalities, but there are similar personalities throughout the family. But in that older group of kids, I definitely was the most approval seeking kid. And so people, I think, can relate to that in my story, where they're a people pleaser and you want to meet other people's expectations and go out of your way to meet their expectations and make them happy.
And when you met Derick, I mean, Derick, you come into her life and it's the first time you have really an outside person that you can confide in seriously about what's going on in your life. Did that change your dynamic with your family?
Yeah, it was definitely the first time that I was encouraged to do that with someone, because there was this like understanding that, okay, well, you guys are moving toward a serious relationship here. So that was encouraged. But before that, yeah, relationships, friends, whoever, it was very like kind of tight-lipped, secure, like you don't get too vulnerable or too open with people.
And Derick, how was that for you coming in? It must have been really so different from how most of us are raised and experience our families.
Sure. Yeah, it was different. We both grew up in Christian households, although it looked very different in my home growing up than in Jill's. But we really treasured the time that we did get to spend together. And I think in a lot of ways, like Jill mentioned, the thorns and roses, it really was a rose. That was one of the benefits of just, getting to know each other. And it made it easier because I was 8,000 miles away at first for the first 6 or 7 months. Mm-hmm. And it really allowed us to get to know each other on a personal level. And you have to talk about something if you're on a video chat for 5.5 hours, which we did 2 of our first 2 conversations. So it allowed us to get to know each other, I think, quicker that way.
I love that. And I loved it in the book because, Jill, you really come across as somebody that is you love your family, you love your parents, and you're trying to make things better, especially when things are difficult. And the abuse allegations, when you having to talk about that, it was nice when you finally had Derick there to have somebody else standing up for you. I know one of the most traumatic parts of the book is the part where the story breaks. They found the letter, that they not found the letter part, but when they re-traumatize you by releasing your statements that had to be made, and feeling like you still were being asked to protect your family and your brother when that was happening. Could you speak a little bit about what that was like at your time, and also how Derick helped support you through that?
Yeah, so I knew writing a book like this that I would have to touch on the topic of the very difficult topic of the release of these records, the illegal release of these records. But I did know that I wanted to handle that with a lot of care. And it's one of those things that, like I say in the book, it was a re-victimization, and it has been very traumatic for me, and it makes me very emotional, even just to have it written down in the book and anytime it comes up in conversation. So it's one of those things that I never wanted out there. And I just, yeah, Derick has been very supportive and an advocate for me and for other victims, to say that this is not okay. We need to hold the people responsible who allowed this to happen. And for other victims, and especially juvenile victims, their story should always be held with utmost privacy and protected. And yeah, that's unfortunately not how my story was. And I hate that for myself, and for, I hope that it never happens to anyone else. And that's what I clearly state in the book. And even the judge's opinions, his opinion was in our favor as far as saying that what happened was illegal. They were not held to the same standard as civilians would be, because they are government officials, so they have a level of immunity that normal people would be different. So
not
yeah,
government employees. Yeah.
So it's heartbreaking to me, and it's very traumatic. And I just, yeah, I'm thankful for a husband who fights daily, even now as an attorney, for the rights of victims.
And you talk in the book about how, this religion this church you were brought up in, is supposed to be an umbrella protecting you. And you felt outside of that, and sort of outside of the protection of your family, even from your father, the time where you needed that. And I know it's difficult, but can you talk a little bit about what your relationship is with your father around this now?
Yeah, so my relationship with my dad is very complicated. It's been a progressive, complicated relationship in the last several years. So yeah, right now we don't just like hang out all the time or anything. We will see each other occasionally at like weddings, funerals, sometimes birthdays, things like that, but not any one-on-one contact. Occasionally like family group text or something, the ones that we're on, the thread that we are on. But no like direct contact with him right now. It's just not healthy. We're just in it. You have to do what's healthy for you. And I, of course, like you said, like I love my family. I want to have healthy relationships, and that's something that we're constantly praying about and working toward. And Lord willing, it'll be something that we get to see someday. But right now, that's where we're at.
There's a thing you wrote. I'm just going to read what you wrote because I think it's so well said. You said, when you're in the world of reality TV, everything has a cost. The shopping carts full of great food, the trip to Nepal to meet Derick in person for the first time, the wedding itself, they all came with a price tag, which we paid by letting the cameras into our lives, giving them access to the raw, unfiltered action to be served up as entertainment. Don't get me wrong, it was a privilege to be able to benefit like that. Being a Duggar on TV meant that I had opportunities and experiences that I would never have enjoyed otherwise. The show gave me so much, and I'm grateful for the places I've been, the moments I've enjoyed, and the people I've met. But some things are not worth the cost. Some things are not for sale. It gave me chills when I read that. And you're a parent now. Would you ever let cameras into your home life raising your children?
Yeah, so I think that the bigger issue for me, obviously, I think children should be protected, but I think the bigger struggle for me now, looking back at everything, is just that I see how it came to crowd and overtake our lives. So the reality show where, people are posting on social media all the time, and that's just a constant battle that parents these days are having to face. And like, what is too much? How much do you involve your kids and all of that? And that's something that I'm still working through. But whenever it's a reality show that basically just relies on your children for content, that's where I'm not okay with the continual invasion of privacy, where it's just, I don't know, just speaking for myself. And I respect other people. Like, I'm not saying that reality TV is horrible or something, but for myself, there were very vulnerable moments that had to be captured because of the content that they needed to produce. So it wasn't like my parents had a reality TV show. It was like the entire family. And then, the kids were having to perform for it to happen. Without the kids, there wouldn't be a show.
I'm struck by how thoughtful you are with all of your answers and your openness. And in the book, it comes across how the more you were meeting other people and, seeing other perspectives, how you were challenging your own, like you didn't hunker down in your own belief system, but you really challenged your own and figured out together what worked for you, and whether or not which church was the right church for you. And I'm just very impressed by that. And can you speak a little bit about how your faith is changing, how your ideas are changing? And, imagine the young Jilly Muffin would have been surprised by some of the things that you believe now, that, beliefs that have changed. And, are you still challenging yourself with these things?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think, looking back, I would have been like, oh my goodness, at myself now. But yes, I think that's just where we're supposed to be as Christians and people, where you're always supposed to be growing and studying God's word and learning more about what it means to be a Christ follower. And so for me, I love the way that my sister Ginger, in her book, her most recent book that came out, talked about her faith journey. And I love how she's talked about disentangling her faith. And I feel like that's very much what Derick and I have had to do, especially me, but on this journey, is just like really studying what, not just like, oh, like I'm gonna la-di-da along and kind of see what feels good, but really studying scripture and seeing what it says about things that I may have been taught one way, and then now I don't believe that, I don't hold to that same viewpoint of what the Bible teaches, as we've looked in scripture and found what we believe it actually says.
I love that you just quoted your sister's book. Do you think that your siblings are going to read your book, and your parents maybe read your book, or are you kind of hoping they don't?
No, I would love for them to read my book. I have reached out to my siblings and told them I'm happy to give them a book if they would read it. And so a few of them are like, yeah, sure, like send me one. And Ginger and Jeremy have been very supportive as well. And yeah, through the whole process here, they've been very kind. So, and then my other siblings, I refrain from saying, but pointing anybody out, because I love my family. Like I've said in the book, like I really do love my family. And for the long haul, like I don't want to put anybody in a position like my siblings, where they would feel like it would halt that relationship. So I want to be careful in how, where people are, because I know how it feels to kind of have those thoughts and not really know. So I don't want to like pressure them to be supportive or not, or whatever.
Again, I love how you accept that other people are in different parts of this journey. And I know that therapy has been a big part of that for you, and you're a big supporter of that. Mm-hmm. And you talk about it in the book. Is that something you're going to continue doing, or is that something that is there an end to us working on fixing ourselves? That would be a great
right. Right. We love, we have really loved therapy. And I told Derick, I was like, yeah, like for birthdays, anniversaries, like we need to just do a therapy session. So
I love that. Our chat is blowing up, so I'm not going to take up any more time on my questions, although I have pages of them left, because I'm sure a lot of these people have similar questions to mine. So I'm going to go ahead. Lindsay and Andy from Adventure Vlog have a question. Jill may have signed a contract, but Derick did not. Did you ever consider using this as leverage, i.e., you can force Jill to film, but Derick and the kids are staying in El Salvador? That's interesting. I hadn't thought.
Oh, yes. We had discussions, but at the same time, I was in a very different place at points in our relationship where Derick would throw these ideas like that out there.
Well, you addressed specifically El Salvador. So if that specific situation was interesting, because by that point we had come to a place as a couple where we were more in agreement, and we actually went further the other direction by saying, if even though Jill signed the contract, if we were to send her and I would stay back with the kids, that would almost acknowledge
that I was obligated.
It almost give credence to the validity of the contract. So we didn't want to acknowledge in any way that we recognized it was a valid agreement.
Because it was not valid.
So I'm like, even if she did sign it, she's not, we made the decision as a couple to stay there as a family.
Wow. And this is the contract that you surprisingly discovered you had signed the night before your wedding, right? That's so interesting. Okay, so Life Equals Vicio says, at what point in the journey did you share, did you guys decide to write this book?
We've been thinking about,
we've been talking about about 8 years probably.
We've been thinking about writing the book for a long time, but we didn't actually start the process, like getting like an agent and book company and all of that, until last year.
Oh, wow. 1 year.
Yeah.
That's right. It actually ends. That makes sense, actually. Now,
in a lot of ways, we were still living our story. So, there was a hard.
It's like, where do you stop? Like, where do you end the story?
Cut it off and wrap it up. And then, in many
we're
ways.
all fixed and better, right?
Yeah.
We'd have no books if that was the case. Okay. Sarah Wilson asks, did your parents know you were writing a book? If so, did they try to talk you out of it?
No, based on our history with family. What were you going to say?
I was going to say,
based on our history.
As of the time that it was announced to the public, they knew.
Yeah, but we, based on our history with family, we just chose not to say anything until it was announced publicly.
Did they contact you when it was announced?
Yes, and even for the family members that we felt like would have been supportive, we didn't want to like put them in that position. And we had other things like this, not this big, but like this before, where I think back to like one therapy session we had where we were like, hey, we were asking our therapist, like, hey, should we tell this one sibling about this life event? And he encouraged us to just like think about it, pray about it, and say like, is that giving them too much of a burden to carry? And I thought that was a good perspective, where like, because my family is pretty close knit, even though there are some family members who are kind of like paving their own way, it was one of those things too, where we're just like, we'll just like not give them that burden to carry. But also too, I mean, I think there was like a book contract too, that, you have to be careful about announcing things or saying too many things to too many people, because it could get out.
Makes sense. You have, by the way, great publisher. We love Gallery Books. So thank you, Gallery, for this event. Molly asks, what would you say you are full on deconstructing? Or would you say you are full on deconstructing?
You said full?
Full on deconstructing?
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure what the question is. Molly,
I think she's saying, would you say you are full on deconstructing? Like deconstructing is part of like your disentangling faith journey type thing. I guess it depends on what people define it as.
I think if your definition,
it's kind of a new term. So
if your definition of full on deconstructing is that we've walked away from our faith, then no. From the very beginning, we're Christians. We want to be students of disciples, which means followers of Jesus Christ, and study what the Bible teaches, which isn't necessarily what certain cultures within our generation would say the Bible teaches, but we want to study it for ourselves and not just hear what other people regurgitate who are from certain cult-like organizations.
But I think it's always good to think critically. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and we don't want to follow a personality or pastor, but just think critically about, and like you said earlier, just challenge anything and everything that we've ever been taught. I think some people look at that and think negatively who are Christians, but the truth is the truth. So, the worst that could happen is you get closer to the truth, even if it's different than what you grew up believing, so be it.
Right. And the truth, I mean, finding your own truth, what it means might be different for different people. And finding what works for you is probably more powerful than listening to what somebody else says works for them, right?
Yeah, I think what's beautiful about the church is just, the Bible talks about diversity in the body, and God creates people with different personalities and different giftings, and that just works beautifully around the world whenever people are operating in their giftings and what their particular personality, how God's created them, and it's just a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. Okay. Thank you for explaining all of that, by the way. I really appreciate it. Okay. MK Mommy 22 has a question. How can these contracts the other kids have signed be legal? Were any of you threatened to sign them or signed them underage?
Yeah, so I do know for a fact that there were some siblings who signed underage, so it wouldn't have been valid for them. And then I know that there have been other agreements that have been signed after that one, and unfortunately, some of those agreements, like the people making people sign them, have gotten a little smarter. So I hope that, that's where I think the ship was sinking, and we were just worried that if we didn't speak up, then people would feel isolated. And when you can isolate someone, you can control them. And this is not a one-time experience. This is something that unfortunately happens more and more. So not even just in my family, but I know in other people's situations too. I just want people to be aware too, situations like this with people that you might trust or love who can still take advantage of the situation.
Did anybody from TLC ever reach out to you? Were they appalled to discover you'd never been paid?
I don't think they ever, that we were going to have a conversation like we talked about in the book. Like we were going to have a conversation with them, but then I think they got worried about, like us not wanting to have my dad's, guy, on the call with them, and they wouldn't talk to us unless we had him on there. So we're like, okay.
This is my opinion, is that they didn't want to know. It's almost like if they had a reason to not.
I don't know. Yeah,
no, that's why I said my opinion. My opinion, based on
a lot of opinions,
our circumstances, yes, but like based on everything going on in the last 10 years of history, my opinion is that they were looking for a reason not to want to be held liable. Like if they could not be aware of it, even if they might have had hints about what might be going on, then they could, say that they didn't know.
Wow. Oh, okay. Molly is asking, what advice would you give to someone who is newly leaving the IBLP?
Run faster.
Go ahead. I would say, but seriously, there are a lot of groups similar. Even if it's not IBLP, I've had a lot of people reach out and just say that they are trying to, figure out life, whether it's adulting, getting married, just feeling like they're trying to sort things out for themselves. So I would say, find a therapist if you can, who aligns with where you want to be and that you vibe with, like somebody, it's kind of like finding a physician or something. Like some people may not be a good fit. So just look around, and then surround yourself with people too that are going to encourage you, and not just like yes people, because that's not always healthy, but people that are going to challenge you and encourage you. And then also, I'm going to recommend another book here, but Boundaries is an amazing book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. It really helped me kind of be able to sort things out in my head, because IBLP does have a lot of teachings that if you're not careful, they will they'll twist the words of Jesus. They'll twist the Bible and kind of say this is what it means. And so when you're in those situations, it's easy to get like foggy brain and be like, wait, like you feel this false guilt. So and then find like in our situation, like finding a good church, like a good solid church that is not part of that. And it'll be hard like leaving that group because it does mean that you're a lot of times cutting off your support. You're losing all your friends and your family, even if it's just for a period of time. Like it's very hard. So you really have to have support around you to be able to do that. And thankfully I had amazing supportive hubby. So
Neha Patel wonders, are you in contact with any of your youngest siblings? And if so, do they know about and understand what you went through with your parents? Any advice you'd want to give them?
I do see my siblings occasionally, like birthday events, or like when I had my last child. They were super sweet and like helped out a little bit and stuff. So but I choose not to. They're still living at home, like with my parents, and so I want to respect that. And I choose not to like bring stuff up with them. I don't want to be that person to create problems in their own household. So I don't feel like that's my place right now to do that. And same with my mom. Like I don't want to. We've kind of come to a place where I don't want to involve her in the drama with like my dad and I or whatever. So I just choose to kind of, when we're together, it's an intentional like happy time, and we want to just like keep it surface, which is hard to do too, but that's kind of just how we relate right now. And if we need to have deep conversations with people and they want to and they come to us and they want to talk, then we're at a place now where, depending on, I mean, multiply that by 20, it can get pretty exhausting, but I have had some conversations with some siblings, and I want to like keep that relationship going and not just like cut people off, but at the same time you can't just like have endless conversations.
And probably like at the point in their life, everyone's at a different point in their journey in their life, and if they're younger, they're probably dealing with other things that maybe can't take that on. It's hard enough to leave your mom. It comes across how much you love your mother in this book, how much you respect her. And there's a line that you use where you say that her smile, you know, this welcoming smile, but it's also a shield, how strong she is really in many ways. And yes. And I imagine it's hard for you to think about your siblings struggling with her or making her burden harder as well as you go through this.
Yes.
So, really interesting. Okay. Janelle wonders, how did you learn to establish and respect boundaries with your family?
It has definitely been a process, but I think the initial part of that started whenever I realized that, because we wanted to just keep low key and keep carrying on with our lives and hope that we wouldn't have to have conflict, you know, but life is life. And when our life did not align with, and our goals did not align with the family and greater the show, then that's whenever we had, like, I was almost like forced to make a decision, you know, who am I going to choose here? Am I going to, like, it was putting us against each other, and that was not healthy. And so at that point is whenever we had to do something. And but the Boundaries book really did help me as well, kind of like figure out things.
There were a few events that were really explosive moments that really, and like Joel said, the need to create boundaries sprung from necessity, ultimately. Like it's nothing that anyone, and I would say this in probably a lot of cases, that anyone just is intentional and just has no reason but just sets out. Usually it's someone running into those boundaries really, really hard that cause you to realize that they're not there. So if that even makes sense, but it's crossing the boundaries to realize that, whoa, what's going on here? And you realize that there aren't any there.
It's probably easier to let the boundaries not be so hard if somebody's just stepping over an inch or two, but if somebody takes a mile, then you realize that what they've done. Okay, Val's Place asks, what's your relationship status with your siblings? Thank you, Jill.
Oh, yeah, my relationship with my siblings, it depends on the sibling. Like I've FaceTime Ginger. She was just in New York and we were talking and it's been great. And then I've had some contact with some of my other siblings, and then some haven't reached out, and I'm fine with that. I also, like I said before, like I want to give them space because I know how it can feel very overwhelming and hard to deal with, especially since we're in the public eye. Like everybody always analyzes everything about your life. So I respect that, and I don't want them to feel pressured to have a relationship with me if that's not where they're at, or to have to talk about things that they don't want to talk about or whatever.
Kelsey Leanne asks, how has your spiritual journey been affected by these experiences with your family?
Protected, what did she say?
How has your spiritual journey been affected by these experiences with your family?
Yeah, I would say a lot, in some ways and not so much in others, like kind of this going back to being forced to think about things more. Yeah, I think that the relationship in my views on faith and everything have changed a little bit in different areas, and some have also just been literally like triggered, I think. So speaking in therapy terms, like triggers that you might face, and or like our therapist said, like arrowheads, you might bump one of those arrowheads and it hurts, so yeah, I think that some of those same things apply for religious beliefs, where maybe something's not wrong, but you're just having to process it and be like, okay, yeah, that still holds true, or it's just hard to go there. Like
I think about whenever we were having a discussion about whether or not it's a sin to wear pants or to have as many kids as possible, usually it has to do with one kind of tertiary thing, because it's not really like the core of our faith, I don't think has changed, but it's more, if anything, it's made us, more steadfast and just really, seeking to know who Jesus is, because that's how we're going to know all these outside things. And if things, outside of culture are things that kind of ebb and flow with culture, then it's probably not something that's core to our belief system. Like if the main verse for having as many children as possible is that children are a blessing, well, like Jill and I have this discussion, well, if children are a blessing, then why would it not be wise to go and adopt 50 children, a newlywed couple who don't have any money to go to adopt 50 children from Africa, because they're a blessing? It's like, well, you can't just throw a verse out there and say they're blessings, so you should get as many as possible.
And we do believe children are a blessing.
Absolutely.
It's just
but we believe they're a blessing, but that doesn't mean that it follows that you should have as many as possible. Usually it's that next step that you've got to evaluate and look back and say, I don't think that follows from that as a requirement. There's no requirement.
Right.
You do.
But what a blessing means to you might be different for you, right? Like how you interpret to use that blessing.
The children that you are given, yes, they are a blessing, so yeah.
I love you're discussing. I love when you're discussing the pants, and Derick's like, well, back when this was written, men were wearing togas, so there weren't pants around like this. Women weren't wearing pants, and men weren't wearing pants. I just love
all men be running around in robes.
I think
I think that's what sometimes Christians in America forget too, is like the Bible was not written in English. Like this is not an American culture thing. This is back Middle Eastern culture, so like you have to think about it sometimes it's hard for us to grasp that sometimes. I think that especially in this group that I grew up in, where they were like KJV only, like King James Version Bible only, because it's like the best translation and stuff, which I'm not saying it's bad, like that translation is bad. I'm just saying that I think stuff like that, when people get so hung up on something, maybe they like kind of lose track of, maybe, I don't know, I think everybody's different, but like maybe they lose track of, hey, wait a second, like this is not an American religion, you know.
Like King James Version Bible might be good for somebody who grew up with that, they know what it means, but for somebody else who comes into reading the Bible and they don't have any background, there might be a lot of words that they wouldn't understand.
I mean, yes, you want it to be accurate. You don't want to just go with whatever translation because it's cool or something. Like you want it to be accurate, but anyways, that's like a little.
Yeah, I'm just talking about understanding specific words.
Yeah.
So
that brings up a bit interesting point about like if they're translations, there's use different words and coming back to, okay, what are the core beliefs that you have? Like, how do you hold on to those? And all these other things are interesting to talk about, but maybe they aren't necessarily sins if you have a different interpretation of those extra things, right? I think it's really, I'm sorry, we could go off on this the rest of the time, but there's so many questions, wonderful questions. Mary Makeup 101 asks Jill.
I'm loving these names, by the way. All the names.
Like they're like, they don't even realize I'm going to say it out loud.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it so they know that there are questions being asked. Jill, do you ever want to further your education in any type of college or career training program? I feel like you would be great in a lot of different fields if that's what you want.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. At this point, I am pretty busy. I mean, just writing a book and everything, but it's definitely something that I would be open to. Somebody told me recently, they were like, oh, you should be a lactation consultant or, you know, something like that. And I did get my midwifery license. I have that on inactive status right now because I just don't feel like practicing full time as a midwife. But
and Jill went to boys college. You went to boys college.
Yeah, I did take some college classes, Bible college classes. But yeah, it's at this season of my life, I'm loving just being a mom and an author and yeah,
she has a lot of her plate.
It's a lot. It is a lot. 3 little boys. Yes. Stephanie Simon asks, do you think if your family wouldn't have gotten a TV show, would your parents have been different towards you kids?
I think that with the whole TV show thing, I definitely think it amplified the issues that were already there and present, but I do see similar problems in other families who were in this IBLP organization. I don't think that it would have been an isolated issue. I think that it definitely magnified the problems, adding a reality TV show to that. But I don't think that they would have been non-existent. Obviously, there wouldn't have been a contract and there wouldn't have been those types of things. You wouldn't have been able to use your kids quite as much, but there would have been a whole lot of the other issues, the pants, the nose ring, like all of those types of things. I feel like those would have still existed.
Even on some levels, I feel like families with family businesses that are generational have very some similarities to what we've gone through. Again, like Jill said, not in some ways to the same level with like throwing gasoline on like with the contract and the deception. But
even our therapist said, like, he's like, I can somewhat relate to your situation growing up on a family farm. And when we sell the farm, you know, how that pans out, you know? So I think, it's not an isolated situation, but definitely amplified it with the show.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really interesting. Okay, Janelle says, my question is for Derick. Was he aware of the family's strict religious beliefs and their involvement in the IBLP?
I got involved with IBLP whenever, not involved, like I became aware of IBLP whenever we were beginning to get to know each other. Jill's dad encouraged me, almost required me to like watch the basic seminar and the advanced basic seminar, all the teachings. And I just kind of saw it as like a collection of sermons because I just came from a pretty
I mean, it's a collection of interesting, weird sermons.
Yes,
Not
no,
like,
I'm talking about how I
you know,
viewed
like
it before.
minimizing it. Yeah.
No, this is how I viewed it before I started watching them.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, here's this basic seminar." Before I started watching it, I thought, "Oh, this is a collection of sermons." And I started watching. It's more like a classroom, almost teaching a certain doctrine versus a collection of sermons.
And he didn't say like you have to adopt these principles or
No.
whatever to marry my daughter. He just said, "Hey, I just want you to watch this." You know? So he's like, "Okay, watch it." You know.
He wasn't very pushy about it, and I watched it, but I wasn't, because he wasn't very pushy about it, going to acknowledge or going to say that I agreed with any of these. And there were some things that Jill and I talked about and she didn't agree with.
Yeah. So we were like, we're not going to bring stuff up like and create an issue out of it if we don't have an issue with it. So.
Oh, it's so interesting. Okay, Elisa Watkins. Since making a stance to make independent choices, have you seen your parents becoming more or less strict with your siblings still at home?
I would love it if my siblings did not have to face some of the same challenges and issues that we have had to face. And so even if they never see exactly where we've come from, because maybe they'll be like, you know, oh, well, I don't see how this happened because, you know, it's not the way it is now or whatever. I would be like, hey, more power to you. I'm glad that it's not that way. And maybe we helped change a few things for them. I don't know. I think my parents are open to some changes. I think that they,
in many ways, it looks like they're in grandparent mode, because Jill looks at,
they would say that themselves in some respects.
And Jill looks at, but on a serious note, Jill
Yeah.
looks at her, younger siblings who are, 12, 13, 14, and they do things that she would never have been allowed to do. And which I feel like is common in a lot of families, but in a lot of ways, I feel like because of what, like Jim Bob learned through our situation, it might also cause him to do things differently in a more, not sinister, but like in like a more controlling way. Mm-hmm. To say, well,
getting smarter,
which kind of goes to why we wanted to write the book, was because, if certain situations, aren't there that we had to go through, well, the heart might still be the same, so we want
we're not writing it at him, but we're saying just in general.
No, I'm writing. Yeah. No, we're talking about writing it for the siblings. That's why I'm saying
yes,
the situations aren't the same, but we want it to be a resource, even if they don't read it now, to read it at some point.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Laura Brooks, would you ever go to make a reality show again? Just you and your family?
No, I don't want to. I mean, I can't say no, never, but like
the biggest thing was, and I think we
had talks about it, but
a big misconception, I think, is that we were just against it, period. But it was more that we were against the way that it came about, that we were ambushed, and just having no control, not being involved in any conversations, not even being asked if we wanted to be part of the show and to what extent we wanted to be part of the show.
Not even knowing the contract that you were
not even knowing that one existed.
That was the bigger issue.
We were years into marriage and had no clue that there was any obligation. We thought, we're just kind of volunteering, helping out whenever. This is her family show. And realized that was not the case. Yeah.
The way that it was set up, the structure of it, not having control over our own lives. That was our biggest issue with it. And then, of course, protecting children's privacy and their rights, and the way that you would do that would be hard to do with a lot of reality TV shows. So, that's where that's at. But I mean, we did have like talks about it, after leaving that show, like, would we ever do that? But I don't know. Not right now. Like, not right now where we're at.
You're doing enough. Okay. Janelle says, are you hopeful that more of your siblings will come out of the IBLP and establish boundaries with your parents?
I mean, I think that.
I feel like that's a softball question.
That's what I mean,
you've sort of touched on
that. But I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pressure them, because I think that doesn't help a lot of times.
Lisa Wagner says, do you still hope to do more international missions?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Our kind of the foundation of our relationship was our mutual calling to international missions. and was in a lot of ways how we became aware of the contract. Was, that was what kind of closed the door on that chapter of our life. Whenever we and we talk about this in the book about how we it was a stepping stone more, because the organization we were with said that this is a year, maybe 2-year long commitment, and we had already started the process with the International Mission Board before even going to El Salvador, and we had already we were doing our seminary hours and finished that up, and then had finished up seminary whenever we realized that, or finished up the hours that this organization required whenever we realized that they weren't going to send us because of this contract.
Mm-hmm. But we don't have like immediate plans to like go long term on the mission field. So to answer kind of that, but we are very like,
we're not leaving next year or something. But we're open to that.
We're never maybe in the future or something. But right now we're like very committed to what we're doing right now and where we are right now. And but we also have a big heart for like international students and
I think it's important to say that it's not either or. Like, while we're here, we still want to. We live half a mile from a university, and we want to have international students into our home for Thanksgiving to experience an American Thanksgiving, because
it's kind of one of those things, like when you've lived in another culture, you're kind of more like open and sensitive to even somebody coming to our culture and experiencing all that you do when you're moving and transitioning and language barriers and all of that. So like you're more like open to.
We have friends from Nepal who have joined us, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years for either Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Yeah.
I love when you say when you're from another culture. It made me think immediately, in some ways, Jill, you are from another culture. I mean, the subculture within America. So you already had that experience of learning what it's like to go outside of that. Okay, Kelsey Lynn again asks, Derick, how did you and Jim Bob originally connect as prayer partners? How did that relationship change over time?
So there's Jill and I were just talking about this again recently. I'm from a small church east of Rogers, Arkansas, and they were familiar. I had heard of Jill's family, but they wanted to go Christmas caroling. We're on a church Christmas caroling group and wanted to go Christmas caroling at the Duggars house. And I was like, that's kind of far away. Do we really have to go that far? Like, we have, and so we went there. And I was trying to, shortly after that, Jim Bob and I connected, I believe around that time. And then I was trying to gather enough prayer support whenever I went to Nepal, because they required us in this organization I was in to have like 150, 200, something like that listed prayer partners. And I went to a church of maybe 50 people. So, I just thought, I'd connected with Jim Bob. I'll ask him if he'll be a prayer partner of mine, because I know they're involved in missions and appreciate that. So I just asked him if he would be one of my people who I could list, because I need to have so many names to list before I go to Nepal for 2 years. And he would call and say, well, let me know how your work goes. Like, if you're going to the mountains for a month, when you get back, we're in the Himalayas, let me know how that trip went. And he did this a number of times and was genuinely interested. And then after a while, I think 18 months later, he was like, hey, my daughter Jill, she really has a heart for missions, and she's studying midwifery. And I think y'all have similar interests and life goals. And here's her number. Why don't you give her a call?
I still have that postcard that Derick sent to my family whenever he like first went on the mission field. He sent us like a postcard, and he told me about that on one of our first calls. And I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, I think it's on our like prayer board thing. So I went over there and grabbed it. Sure enough, his handwriting was on the back and stuff. So
that's so sweet. Okay, Homemaking and Happy says, Derick has obviously been a blessing in your life and helped support along in your journey of healing. Do you think if you had not married Derick that you would have ever gotten to where you are today?
No, I mean, I think that we were meant to be together. And I mean, this is not like, it sounds very cliche, like, oh, the one or whatever. I don't think there's like always like the one, when people, but whoever you marry is the one that you're supposed to marry. So yeah, I think that God knew what I needed in a husband and somebody who was strong and independent and could appreciate things about the way that I grew up that were positive, but then also speak truth into the things that needed to be a little bit different. So.
And Jill has grown me in so many other ways, so it's mutual. You know, I think that's the beauty of, you know, any couple.
And a lot of times too, it wasn't just him saying this needs to change. It was like me having like arriving at my conclusion and then him backing me up. So yeah, because people always, I feel like in this situation, they like to say, oh, they changed you, or it was all them or their fault or whatever. But I'm like, we compliment each other.
That's the best. So I see we're at 5:30. So I'm going to take one more question from the audience here. Christina Yori says, do you have any plans for writing more books?
I don't know. Like, we haven't really, you were just asking, I don't know if we write another book someday, what would it be? I don't know. Like, we'll see.
on the chat, does anyone have any ideas on topics?
Children's book. I don't know. My sister did a children's book. Yeah,
true.
So cute.
I have to say, you know, there's so much in the book that's, I know, difficult and that probably was hard to write, but there is so much joy in the book. And I feel like our conversation today, you really see why, because of who you are and how you're embracing life and all these challenges. So thank you so much for being here today. Really, thank you, Jill and Derick. Thank you to our audience members for being here. Remember that if you go to bookpassage.com, we do have signed book plates for this wonderful book. I highly recommend. And also a big thank you to Zach, who's behind the scenes, making us look like we know what we're doing up here. So always appreciate him there. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.